Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the AJ Analysis channel and another live stream. Weirdly, it feels like ages since we last did one of these. It feels like a long time since we last spoke, even though it was only Friday. Probably the result of a long, boring international break. But soon it is over. Soon Manchester United are back in action. The question is, will Kobbie Mainoo be back in action? Probably not. So far this season, not really being used. That is the big conversation for today. We mentioned it on Friday's live stream, and I sort of said, you know what, it feels like this needs a whole stream to itself, a big discussion. The plan for today is to have what I feel is the most balanced discussion about Kobbie Mainoo. I want us lot as a community to have the most fair conversation here regarding Kobbie, because in one moment I absolutely think he should be playing a lot more football. But also, he has become one of those players in the fan base where it almost feels like you're not allowed to criticise him without getting absolute pelters yourself. So today what I want to try and do is have a very honest conversation about Kobbie Mainoo, and I want a lot of help from you guys to do that. Thinking about how does Kobbie fit into this system? How does Kobbie fit into the ideal system? What's his best role? Where should he be playing on the pitch? How many minutes should we be expecting him to get? You know, he's still only 20 years old. How's he had success in the past? There is all sorts that we need to discuss today, which is why, like I said, we need to have an exclusive Kobbie Mainoo stream. By the way, why does Stream Elements keep doing this? It's to do with the software that I use, but I've always used it. But yes, before we get into any of that conversation, before we even talk about Kobbie Mainoo, I want to hear from you guys about how life is. How are you? And how are you feeling about United? A long international break, like I said, a long time without United playing, which is always a nice opportunity to reflect. And how has that reflection been going? How do we feel about United right now? A lot of the time when United don't play is actually when we can be our most positive, particularly when we ended before the international break on a win. So how are we feeling right now? Obviously, we know we've got Liverpool coming up. That's in the back of our minds. We'll discuss that a little bit more on Friday. But yeah, I just want to hear from you guys how you're feeling, how's life, how you're feeling about Manchester United, and of course, the whole Kobbie Mainoo situation. Because I would call it a situation, you know, there is something here that needs to be discussed and sorted out, because he's too good a talent to not use. It is my opinion. You guys that have been around for a long time will know that this is one of my favourite players on the planet. I believe we are looking at one of the most gifted young footballers that English football has produced in a long time. But right now, he's not even in discussions or conversations for England, and that's because he can't get in the team at United. So yeah, that is the discussion for today. Let's have a look in the chat. It's annoying with these international breaks, always kills our momentum. Yeah, it always, I think for United fans especially, the international breaks are just annoying because we've either just lost, so then we've got 2 weeks of absolute misery, or we've just won, and it's like, we could actually build some momentum. Maybe we could go back to back for the first time in a long, long time. But always it just gets disrupted like bang. Nope, none of that. Very annoying. And I like international football. So yeah. I think Kobbie is the least suited to the way that we play. He would like to play in a possession-based system, in a midfield 3. He suits the worst out of our midfield options. Yeah, and that's why I want to have a couple of different conversations today, because I think that's a fair point. I think a lot of us look at it and go, he's not really a Ruben Amorim midfielder, which for me personally speaks volumes about Ruben Amorim and what he wants from his midfield, what he wants from his system, the longevity, the peak of his idea. That's one conversation. So yeah, we do need to discuss how can we get Kobbie into Amorim's idea, but also I think it's a fun idea, not to speculate that the manager's going to be sacked or anything like that, but just to think about Kobbie in an ideal world. Unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world, right? But if we had to build like the dream setup, the dream scenario for Kobbie, what would that look like? Is that something that we can do? I am always of the opinion that the manager's job is to get the best out of his players. Now, granted, there will be some players that it's not worth changing for because they're not good enough. Alejandro Garnacho, a good footballer, probably wasn't worth changing the system for, though, right? I feel that Kobbie can be. And it's not necessarily a case of ripping it all up and starting again. Tweaks always can probably do enough to help us out, right? I saw the Chelsea game live from right behind the dugout. Thought Kobbie was sulking, whereas Amorim actually trusts him to do a job as a sub and grow into a starter. Yeah, I think Kobbie's body language is always one that comes across as quite interesting. He almost sulky at times is what people probably would describe him as. I think it's because he's got that sort of laid-back persona, which I don't think is a bad thing for a footballer to have at all. I think sometimes it can be mislabeled as sulking, but there also perhaps is the potential that that is happening. I would be sulking if I was him. You know, we had, what was it, 16 months ago, he produced this performance in the Euro semi-final. You know, for an England team that struggled, he came onto the pitch and made England look absolutely brilliant in that game. It was England's best performance, and Kobbie was very much at the heart of it. 18 months later, there's conversations that he might go to England under 21s. He's playing much less football than what he was previously. He should be disappointed. He should be, not sulking necessarily, but he should be a little bit hurt by all this. Of course, the important thing is for him to react in the right way. The talks yesterday were that seems to be the case. He seems to be a player that is knuckling down. He's training hard, trying to get himself ready to play. But I think his manager has to help him out a little bit as well. Are you going to discuss Kobbie playing with or without Bruno? We can absolutely do both. I think, yeah, that's an important conversation. We don't know how much longer necessarily that Bruno's going to be at the club. So maybe we could have that conversation about how Kobbie could work without him here. We can talk about that. Kobbie's more quick than Bruno in every aspect. Look, the tempo of our current system doesn't suit Mainoo. Mainoo must be sent on loan. Good for him and the team. Can tweak the whole team to suit Mainoo. It doesn't make sense. I get the point, right? I completely agree that no player is bigger than the club, and you should never rip up a whole idea just to get the best out of one player. I think that's fair. But I think when we're talking about Mainoo, we're not just talking about anyone. And I don't mean to be disrespectful with this comment. We're not talking about a Willy Kambuala, right? A couple of seasons ago. We're not talking about a James Wilson who used to play up front. We're not talking about just another academy player who's half decent and will end up in the championship. We are not talking about that. We are talking about a seriously gifted footballer. I'm of the opinion that if he had played regularly under the right manager for him, over the past 18 months, I think he would currently be in discussions with some of the best central midfielders on the planet. And that's well ahead of schedule. He's only 20 years old. He doesn't need to hit his peak till 26. But I think he's seriously gifted. For me, I'm looking at the manager and I've got a big problem. It's a massive problem if you can't get the best out of what I feel is one of your best players. I think if we look at the Manchester United midfielders, we'll call them midfielders, right? You've got Casemiro, you've got Kobbie Mainoo, you've got Bruno Fernandes, you've got Ugarte. Let's call all of these a central midfielder. I think as a central midfielder, these days Kobbie has the most to offer. Not necessarily in this system, but if you were to profile them all as an 8, for example, right? Kobbie's probably got the most to offer. Ugarte has massive parts of his game that are lacking on the ball. Casemiro, you know, on his day, of course, back in the day, a wonderful footballer, but he's past his peak. And Bruno Fernandes, to be fair, very useful in the 8, but always been more suited to the 10. As an outright midfielder, a number 8, I think Kobbie Mainoo is one of our best. I think he is one of the best players that we have, one of our best central midfielders. So therefore, it doesn't make sense to not use him, right? And that's the thing that I can't get past with my manager. Your system, your idea shouldn't be so stubborn that you can't get the best out of your best player, your best midfielder. That doesn't quite add up in my head. So I get the idea that Amorim shouldn't just sack off his idea. Of course he shouldn't, not for one player. But I also think that every manager worth anything should be adaptable enough to move to a new club, recognise that they've got slightly different players to what they had at their last club, and adapt accordingly. You know, recognise that you're in a different league, so the requirements are different. Recognise perhaps that you're even at a different club where different things are required. This is a football club built on the academy. And, you know, we're taking our best academy players and not using them. Some people won't mind. Some people think at the end of the day, winning is just the most important thing. But for me, I will always feel more connected as a United fan to the players that come through the academy because they're sort of living our dream, right? They're the players that were United fans from a young age and got to become a United player. It's almost someone that we can connect with. In my opinion, we should always have these guys in our team as much as possible. We should be trying to get them in, especially when they're that good. I just think he's too good for us to go, but he's not Amorim's type. You know, that's like having Messi and going, yeah, but he's not 6'2" and an absolute powerhouse, so I'm not going to play him. You know, it doesn't make sense. Get the best out of your good players, right? Get the best out of them. Create the best version of Kobbie. Exactly. David, good morning to you, my friend, and thank you very much for the gifted membership, as always. Guys, you know what to do. If you see a gifted membership, very often from David, then make sure to put some love hearts in the chat, because it is that sort of support which really keeps the channel going, particularly in these moments where, you know, we don't have club football, we don't really have an awful lot to talk about, it's difficult to find videos to produce. Gifted memberships, super chats, things like that really do help a lot. So make sure to say thank you in the chat, because it is people like David that keep us going. Absolute legend. What is Kobbie's best position? Something that we need to discuss today. I'm not sure if he is an 8 or a 10. He is certainly not a 6, which is basically deja vu, because I said the same thing about Pogba for years. If he's anywhere near as good as Paul Pogba, wow. What a footballer. What a footballer. I personally am of the view that he's an 8. You know, I think I've always almost had this quite a basic idea really, a basic thought about how you construct a midfield. This is something that I've sort of had in my mind for, I don't know, probably over 10 years. You sort of, for me, build your midfield with your deeper, more defensively secure one. Then you've got your linking one, and then you've got your creative one. For me, Kobbie would always be that linking one. I think Steve sort of made a similar comment earlier. Yeah, for me, Kobbie needs to be the main man for taking the ball from the defence and progressing the ball over the halfway line, then backing up the attack. That sort of linking player between this area over here and this area over here. I think that's Kobbie's best role. I think that's what he is best at as a player. So then for the manager, I think you've got to look at that. You've got to recognise that and find a way to do it as often as possible. That's what management is. That's your job as a coach, in my opinion. Does anyone disagree with that? Does anyone disagree with that? You know, this idea that the manager should adapt to his players. Not completely. Let's please, don't take me the wrong way here. Make it very clear. You can't completely change for a player. But do you guys largely agree that the manager's job is to look at what he's got, the players that he's got? Of course, add new ones in when you want to and move on some of them as well. Sure. But take the players that you've got and find a way to maximise them. You know, for me, that's always the job of the manager. We would sit here under Erik ten Hag and we'd criticise the squad, yes, of course, but we'd go, he's not getting enough out of this player, he's not getting enough out of this player. Even Ollie, right, when he was manager, particularly towards the end, it was, he's doing a good job, but these players are so good, they could be even better. They could be even better. For me, I think the manager's job always is to make them more as a footballer. He's not explosive enough to be the linking central midfielder. I'm not hating, I'm just being objective. I think that would be a fair comment in a different, or it's almost dependent on the system, right? I think some systems need an incredibly explosive linking midfielder. Others don't. You know, Bernardo Silva done it at Manchester City for a very long time, and he's one of the least explosive athletes I have ever seen. Like, probably the least explosive athlete in any sport I've ever seen in my life, you know. And it worked for him, right? It worked for him. Bernardo Silva made it work. Odegaard has had a sort of linking role at Arsenal for a long time. And yes, physically he is a little bit better than Kobbie, but you still wouldn't describe him as explosive in his actions. So I absolutely think it can work. You know, the great Barcelona teams, of course, we're now talking about some of the very best to ever play the game, so take it with a pinch of salt. But, you know, they weren't necessarily the most explosive players that I've ever seen. Now, yeah, different league, different time of football, sure. But I don't think there is this outright blueprint that you have to be explosive to be a linking midfielder. In fact, I think that's actually something that we've gone wrong with in English football for a long time, that we do put this extra emphasis on being explosive central midfielders rather than trying to find these sort of craftier ones, if you like. I think that's where English football has always lagged behind a little bit. I think at the moment we're seeing a slight change away from that, with the likes of Wharton being developed, Elliot Anderson, Kobbie Mainoo, Curtis Jones even. Some of them explosive still, yes. But I think that's a problem with how we viewed football in this country for such a long time. I think in Spain we'd be looking at Kobbie and like, that's everything that we want in a midfielder. He ticks every box that we could ever dream of. Sure, it'd be nice if he could run a bit faster, but his value on the ball brings so much more to the team. I think that's how different places would look at it. AJ, Amorim has a plan for Mainoo. I think they talk a lot. He has started giving him time by time. Let's believe in the process. If we get a player like Wharton or Baleba, then we can play Mainoo always. I would I would love to say with confidence that I agree. In that first sentence, what was it? Amorim has a plan for Mainoo. I would love to agree. I would love to believe it. I just don't know if I do. And that's not me trying to be overly negative about the manager. You know, it's okay for a manager to not like a player. I just don't know if I trust the words. I think if we really had a plan for him, we would be doing something different. We wouldn't be calling him back up to Bruno Fernandes, who realistically is seemingly Mr. Undroppable at United. It's a tricky one. Bruno also lacks the defensive instincts, but has the athleticism and intensity. Yeah, of course we are sort of, what's the word? I don't know, just held back by the fact, I guess, in terms of versatility with midfielders and flexibility with midfielders. We are held back by the fact that we play with 2. If you play with 3, that's more than 2. Quick maths lesson for you there. But if you play with 3 in the middle of the park, across the 3 of you can cover the running. Suddenly you've got 2 of you've got to cover that little bit of extra distance, which is where it's difficult for Kobbie, right? That is where he struggles in the eyes of Ruben Amorim. Amorim is incredibly stubborn. I think we'll all agree with that. Whether you like him or not, whether you think he's good or bad, we can probably all settle on the fact that he's very stubborn in his ideas. He probably admits it himself and has said he sees one way of playing football and is going to stick to that. Now, that's a conversation for a different day in terms of the red flags there. But you find a way to get him in the team. You find a way to get your best players. You know, we're not getting Bruno Fernandes even right now. Probably, again, a conversation for a different day. But Bruno Fernandes isn't playing his best position. So what are we really doing here? Does this little midfield thing that we've got going on at the moment, does it suit Casemiro? Not really. Not really, I don't think. I think the ground coverage is too much for him. Does it suit Bruno Fernandes? Not really. He's too far away from your position goal. We've seen defensively he does lack the instinct at times. Cost us a couple of goals this season, probably. So it doesn't really suit him. Does it suit Ugarte? Possibly more so. I think a double pivot actually sort of complements his style a little bit, the way that he jumps about the pitch. But he's completely out of favour. And then we've got Kobbie Mainoo, who's completely out of favour. So if I was just the manager, if I was the manager here, we talk about midfield as the engine room, the hub of a team, the heartbeat of a team. You know, sort of the saying has always been, if you win the midfield battle, you've got a good chance of winning the game. Yet none of our midfielders actually really seem to suit what's going on. So surely, at that point, it's worth experimenting with something different. And again, we should make it clear, we're not talking about destroying the team and starting again. We're talking about trying something different. Why keep going with something which doesn't work? It's been pointed out Casemiro has been fine this season. Yeah, I think he has had a decent start to the season. But I don't think any of us feel that, you know, he was exactly handmade for this role. Right, you know, it's not the dream role for Casemiro, because playing with someone who struggles to run in a 2-man midfield is tricky. It's tricky. Mainoo plays enough. Sometimes we forget he is only 20, 21, which would be okay for a smaller club. But playing centre-back, central midfield at such a young age at a club like ours is mad difficult. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. We do have to remember how young he is. I think Ousmane Dembele is a beautiful example, right? There's been this, I don't really know when it started, but there's this expectation these days that if you haven't made it by 21, probably as a footballer and in real life, to be fair, if you haven't made it at 21, if you're not a world beater, if you're not a Ballon d'Or contender, then it's a crisis. But as you've pointed out there, that's not the case. He is still incredibly young. And I'm not saying he should be starting every week. I don't think he needs to play 90 minutes a week. In fact, I agree, that would probably be a bad thing for him. It would probably be bad for him to play 90 minutes every week in terms of his physical development, but even the spotlight, the pressure that puts him under. But I think he could play more than 20 a week, because I don't think that's helping his development either. Overplaying someone would absolutely harm their development, but so would underplaying someone. Always, we're trying to find that middle ground, the right balance for a player. And for Kobbie, it's more than 20 minutes a week. Right, it is that. It's not 90 a week, but it's more than 20 a week. That's my opinion. I don't see a combination that would suit Kobbie or Bruno in the 2-man midfield. Yeah, and that's where there has to be a problem, right? Again, the manager's job is to get the best out of what he's got. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that. And then we take the midfield, and we play 2 midfielders typically. And we've got 4 midfielders to go into those 2 positions, and none of the 4 fit the 2. You know, Casemiro is designed to play in a midfield 3. Bruno Fernandes is designed to play at the tip of a midfield three. Kobbie Mainoo is designed to play in the middle of a midfield three. Is that not therefore obvious as what the solution is? And there's different ways you can achieve that. For example, you could take Cunha out, not been in the most amazing form recently, and you could almost, because we always say the starting positions and formations, etc. Formation isn't the biggest thing in the world. You could do this. You could play like this. If you wanted, you could swap these around. I would argue you've got Bruno Fernandes in his best position, and you've got these two on the pitch. And if you wanted to, when you defended, you could drop Bruno a little bit deeper. We have not ripped up Ruben Amorim's idea because we've stayed within his initial sort of blueprint. But we are suddenly helping our midfielders play roles, do jobs that suit them a little bit more. And this is what I'm talking about. The changes don't have to be drastic, but surely there are ways that we can just make life a little bit easier for certain players. Surely that's something that we can do. Again, surely that's the job. I don't want to go full Roy Keane, but that's the job of the manager to try and help the players. What if one of the centre-backs, say Mazraoui or Martinez, could push up into midfield in possession? Would that help the hole that we have there? Allows us to play with Bruno and Mainoo. Ray, it's an interesting comment. Who did I see talking about this? Can't think. What we've seen a lot of over the past few seasons is, particularly probably the last 18 months, is teams starting to build possession and certainly attack teams in this sort of shape, where you've got three at the back and then the one in front. Erik ten Hag was one of the first ones to really use it in the Premier League. But we've seen Arteta do it. We've seen Slot do it at times. Guardiola does it quite a lot. A lot of different managers have tried this. Even Amorim has. And there is an argument that this has, boosted the need for ball-carrying players, right? Because if you are the defending team here, the team in white, you win the ball back. Because there's only one in midfield, if you can carry the initial part, you can get yourself a lot of territory. Potentially a solution to that, and some teams do this, Ten Hag eventually started to do this, was rather than sort of playing with this 3 and then a 1, can you play with almost a 2 and a 2? Idea being that by having that midfield line of 2, you get pressure on the ball carrier, you slow down the ball carrier, you sort of slow him down before he carries it 40 yards and destroys you. And like you said there's probably a couple of United players that could do that. Lisandro Martinez is one. Even Luke Shaw could play this role. Mazraoui probably could. Diogo Dalot probably could. It is an option for us. We have seen at times United adopting this shape. Perhaps it is a way to give yourself a bit more defensively, but as you have pointed out also, give your players a license to go adventure a little bit further forward as well. Give the likes of Bruno that license to join the attack. It's an interesting idea. The direction we are heading makes me nervous in general. We used to have a decent number of academy players coming through and contributing minutes and goals and assists. It's also our DNA, let's not forget. Yeah, this is something else I saw online. Ruben Amorim's come in with his DNA. What he wants to do, how he wants to play. That's absolutely fine. That's why we appointed him. Whether you agree or not with the idea, that's why we appointed him, right? Because he's got his principles, he's got his ideas, his philosophy, and sort of his DNA as a football man. I think also, though, as a manager, you have got to respect the DNA of the place that you're going. Now, a lot of people will say, at the end of the day, you just got to win. Just winning is the most important thing. But I will always feel, as a Manchester United fan, and perhaps it is different at United to what it is other clubs, there's more pressure, of course. But I do think there is that DNA of you need your academy in there. I think the academy is incredibly important to United. I think it's been such a big part of our history. I'm not saying we've got to play 6 academy graduates week in, week out. I'm not saying half the 11 has to be Carrington. I'm not saying that. But I do think it's an important part of our club. And I don't think it's something that we should just ignore and let fade away. Because if we do, there's that risk that we become one of those big soulless clubs, which there's too many of in football right now. Your PSGs, your Manchester Cities, your Chelseas. We don't want to become that, right? Sure, the trophies would be nice, but surely there's a different way that we can do it. I think we want to keep that sort of heart and tradition of the club, whilst we can win as well. Please and thank you. I don't think Kobbie's talent warrants all this. The only midfielder we have that warrants moving the chess pieces around this much is Bruno. In the 10, he is a game changer. But that's where I would sort of stick with your point. This comment here was nothing to do with Kobbie, this one in particular. But you've made that comment about Bruno in the 10. And the reason you've made that comment is because you feel it's Bruno Fernandes's best position, right? You should try and get every player in the best position. You're always going to struggle to do 11, but you should be aiming to try and get 8 really in their ideal role. Kobbie, I would say, is one of those. Like you said, it's not worth ripping everything up for, but I don't feel you have to, and I don't feel it's just for him that you're doing it. That's my opinion. I'd like to see Bruno start as a 10 with Mbeumo at wing-back. Yeah, of course, something that we've discussed recently. Could Mbeumo play there to almost free us up with our attacking selection a little bit, particularly whilst Ahmad wasn't in great form? Kobbie could then play in the 8 and they can pivot between each other. Yeah, and that's a way of achieving a midfield 3 without necessarily starting in it. You can still play the defensive players that Amorim wants in the team. You can still approach it with a similar structure. You just defend differently, right? The academy is getting investment, but the aim is 10 million sales, not getting players for the first team. Yeah, I think Ratcliffe made a comment right. He's like, the academy is a great way to make money. And he's not wrong at all. He's not wrong. We've seen City, the past few seasons, the players from their academy that they have sold for a lot of money has been a big reason why they've been so successful. But I don't like it. I don't like it. Perhaps that's what the modern game is, but if it is, I don't like the modern game. I don't think that's how it should be. Sadly, it is. Sadly, it is. Like you said, the academy now feels like a place that you get players to a good level, you sell them off. You sell them off. That's more interesting, it seems, to modern clubs than coaching them to be players that can star in your midfield week in, week out, or be in your front line, or be a goalkeeper or whatever. And it is a shame. It is a shame. You can't expect academy players coming through every season. That's insanely rare. Yeah, again, I completely agree. Like I said, it's not a case of getting 18 Carrington players in the starting 11. It's not that at all. I think we should always have a few about the place. I think there should always be a few that feel like genuine squad players. Kobbie is one at the moment. I would say past him, we are, just looking at the squad, we're lacking them right now. That's not necessarily Amorim's fault. That part, he isn't the one who perhaps hasn't brought up enough talent in the past few years. That's not on him. Perhaps he's unlucky that he's the one potentially only working with one, although he did sell 2 as well. But yeah, I'm not saying we've got to field a team with under 18s. That would be unreasonable and it just wouldn't work. Wouldn't work at all. You have to remember the academy is mainly run by former City people and they just don't have the United DNA. Yeah, and it's tragic. It's a sad, sad state. If Mainoo can develop some physicality and athleticism, he will save us £100 million and more. I will go back to this. Now, this is Euros final. Unfortunately, our friend Dave made a slight mistake. It was a Euros semi-final. I think if Kobbie, at the time of this match, played for Brighton, played for Ajax, played for, I don't know, Monaco, Lille, I don't care. If he played for one of those clubs, after these performances, we would have thrown so much money at him. He was one of the best players for England last year. A side that got all the way to the final. Granted, didn't play particularly good football, but Kobbie was sort of, at times, the shining light in that team, the technical quality he could bring to the team. Now, again, I'm not saying he suddenly needs to be a starter playing every week, but I think this is a reflection of his clear talent. And like I said, if he was playing at Brighton, we'd have spent so much money on him. We'd have spent a ridiculous amount of money on him. Adam Wharton, who we're heavily linked with and everyone seems to want and love, great footballer, completely agree. But he lacks intensity, he lacks physicality, he lacks ground coverage. But it's almost like because he plays for someone else, it's okay because he's a shiny new toy that we can go and get. I think we should be working on the players that we've already got. In my opinion. If solving the Mainoo situation becomes a problem, then it's better to sell him than keep him at the club with no certainty on his future, then bring in another midfielder that actually fits. I get the point behind that. I think what a lot of it is as well is it would be different if we were winning. If we had, won our first 5 games, or, let's say we'd won 5 of 7. Let's say we were a very good team last season. It would be like, doesn't matter. We wouldn't be complaining because we'd be winning football matches. But when you're not winning, it's like, surely we could change something. right? Like, it's not like it's perfect right now and we're asking for change. It's poor right now and we're asking for change, which I think is different. You know, if Casemiro and Bruno as a two-man midfield was working beautifully, dominating every game, sure, it'd be crazy to change it. Kobbie, you just got to hold that. It's unfortunate. But I don't think changing Amorim's ideas right now would be a bad thing. You know, asking him to do something different, I don't think it's a big problem. I think it's a solution. Not sure. Shine the toys we have. Exactly. Get the polish out. I think you're underestimating Wharton's ability and profile. Yeah, very different player to Kobbie Mainoo. Of course he is. That goes without saying. Very, very different footballers. But a lot of what is thrown at Kobbie is the intensity comments. If you watch Wharton, if you watch Crystal Palace, you look at the numbers behind Crystal Palace, you'll find they're a team that defend quite deep, very often in their low block. They don't do a lot of pressing football. The requirements, the demands are very different. And by the way, I should make it clear, I love Wharton. He's a phenomenal footballer. Phenomenal footballer. That's why I did a video on the second channel. He's amazing. He's amazing. Kobbie needs to learn the longer ball spray pass. Yeah, that's definitely something I would like him to add to his game. And that's the important thing about this whole conversation. And that's why I said it's not about Kobbie playing every week. It's not about that. It's not about him playing 90 minutes every week. Of course not. He's 20 years old. He doesn't need to be at his peak for another 5 years. You know, we don't need that instant gratification for once in life, right? Let's give him a little bit of time to develop. He does have areas where he needs to work. The longer pass is something that Amorim values highly. Clearly, he likes that long ball to the wing-backs. Kobbie can do it in moments. He tended to do it more in the academy than what he does the first team. I don't know if he doesn't trust that sort of... If he doesn't trust himself to play that pass, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's something that he needs to work on. He does need to work on his intensity. Completely agree. He does need to work on his strength, perhaps. Completely agree. He needs to work on his endurance as well. Probably not spoken about quite as much. But by the 70th minute, if he does start, he does look tired. That needs to change. He looks a little bit leggy. He's got areas that he needs to work on. Of course he does. Of course he does. It's both sides. I think Amorim has to do more to try and help him, to find a way to help him into the team, because that's what you do as a manager. You help your players. But also as a player, as an individual, you've got to step up as well. You've got to make yourself better. You've got to make yourself undroppable. I think that's what Kobbie hopefully is trying to do. Hopefully we are seeing that response from him. Whether we are or not, I don't know, but hopefully we are. You know, the sort of message that we received yesterday was that he was working hard to try and get in the team, because that's what he wants. He's a professional footballer, and you know, he's played 113 minutes in the Premier League so far this season, which isn't as much as he would like to play. I also thought this was interesting in terms of Kobbie's best role, because there was a spell in the academy where he played as a 10. You know, he was a sort of creative high midfielder. Then he broke into the United team. 2023-2024 was when he really started playing regularly. You look at his heat map, of course, given the license to play forward, like an 8. You know, both ends though. But what's interesting, I think, in that first one is the amount of action he's getting sort of deep centrally. If you look to the next season, last season, 2024-25, you can see it's quite a different role that he's playing. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I actually think it could be quite useful for a young player to do that, to sort of experience playing in a few different positions. I think helps add things to your game, you know, because the job of a 10 is very different to the job of an 8 or a 6. I think actually playing a few different positions might help Kobbie. I think this can be a good thing for him in the long run. But it is interesting in terms of the idea of what his best position is. If I told you right now he was a 6, you know, you'd lose your mind. But in that first season, we can see him playing quite deep. And if we go to his debut, number 37 there, he was a 6. He was our deepest midfielder. You'd have seen it in the thumbnail. He was our deepest central midfielder. He played that position just ahead of 2 centre-backs. And that was sort of where he did his thing. It's an interesting one. I would like to hear what you guys think his best position is. Perhaps it's not position, perhaps it's role, perhaps it's area as well. If a player has so many areas to work on, are they actually a good player? Yes, because good doesn't mean perfect. Only a perfect player doesn't have anything to work on, and I don't think there's a perfect footballer on the planet, right? So, yeah, I think good players have lots of areas to work on. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think Bruno Fernandes is more than a good player, right? Bruno Fernandes is phenomenal. He's a joke. But it's so many things he could add to his game. Of course there is, because he's not a perfect footballer. Good is not the equivalent of perfect. Good needs work. Perfect doesn't. You're probably never going to get there, to be fair. Kobbie slows the game down too much as well. This is why, for me, he is not an 8. He's a 6. A guy who passes the ball to the player that would make the play. I think, again, that sort of comes down to sort of the current brand of football as well. I would say for Amorim, he slows the game down too much. Whereas another manager would go, oh, I love that he slows the play down. And that is that difference in terms of what a manager is demanding. Another manager would love that he sort of slows the play down, absorbs towards him, and that's what frees other people. And that's how his on-the-ball action is slow, but his release makes it quick, which I think goes under the radar a little bit. But yeah, another manager would go, I want a player who's going to play two-touch and ping it constantly. That's different managers wanting different things, of course. Amorim isn't maximising our players at all, and that's why every manager fails at our club. Yeah, you know, I think it's the job. Maximise. His best role for me is a ball playing deep in midfield, maybe with intense 8s around him, like Kante or Caicedo. So that's obviously the other conversation we've been having, Steve. Was it last week or the week before? About if you... Let's remove Kobbie's name. You've got player X. They are sort of a dribbler. Good close control. They like working in tight spaces. They like playing a short passing game. That's player X. Do you couple that with a player that's going to enhance that? Player A, who is also a tight space expert, who is also a good short passer, also a good dribbler, also quite agile, and also got good ball control. Do you couple them together? Or do you take player X and put him with player B? Player B being 6'2", a ground eater, a duel winner, a ball winner, a battler, not so pretty on the ball, bit more of an engine. What do you couple them with? Sort of conversation that we were having last week, and it did get a very mixed response. Surely the conversation then is who is the best player for this manager and his current intentions? Yes. Yes. In a normal world. In a normal world, I think yes. But I don't think we live in a normal world when sort of our manager's intentions led us to 15th last year. That's sort of my... That's where I think this is a more tricky conversation than normal, because we've got that idea of always wanting to back our manager, which I think we should do. But also I think we all have those doubts as well. Like, we all sort of have that feeling in our head of, is he even going to be here in a month? And like, do his ideas even make sense? Do his ideas even work? Are his ideas something that we should be backing? Or should we be trying to change his ideas? I think it's tricky. If we knew that sort of we had a manager now in place for the next 2.5 years and his brand of football was good, his brand of football was effective, his brand of football got results, you know, could go on streaks of winning 6 Premier League games in a row, I think it'd be quite easy to sort of back that manager and say, if the player don't fit, the player don't fit, unlucky, you're going to have to go. We're backing our manager because he's proven that he can be successful. The problem for Amorim, I think, in getting the fans' trust is that he doesn't have that. He doesn't have that. There is sort of this constant feeling that he might go. You know, that's sort of in the back of our minds just because the results have been quite poor. He hasn't strung those results together. You know, he's only managed to ever to get one in the Premier League in a row. Like I say, I think a more secure club, it would be a different conversation. We're not a secure club. We're not. We're not secure in our management right now. We're not secure in our players. It does make it tricky. It does. Ruben did not lead us to 15th, mate. Well, okay. Was it literally 15th? I can't remember where we finished. The point was, you know, he was the manager for roughly 66% of the season, roughly 2/3, and we finished roughly in that position in the table. And he was the leader of the starting 11. He wants the all-action midfield that can cover the grass. Otherwise, it forces him into a compact shape. Yeah. I think that's what it is. I think Amorim sees the midfield in a very different way to what a lot of other people see the midfield. And again, you know, we could sit here all day and talk about what's right and what's wrong, but I think we can agree that they're different. I think there is this You look at your Barcelonas and your PSGs, the focus is on sort of cute, diminutive midfielders that can link the play, that can control the play, and can slowly move you through the lines. Of course, do it quick as well. Amorim obviously sees it differently. Not necessarily wrong. Not necessarily wrong. We should make that clear. He wants a different type of midfielder, it does seem. He wants that more direct player. Everyone keeps saying he wants a shin kicker, right? Someone who just sort of runs about, kicks people, and then passes the ball 40 yards. Which might be a little bit reductive, but not necessarily entirely wrong. But again, that's where it becomes tricky to back, because Amorim almost wants us to buy into this idea that as of yet hasn't shown an awful lot of evidence of working. I think that's why it can be difficult to sort of buy into it, to really, really go, you know what, I fully back Amorim, because you know what, he's proven that he can do it. He hasn't proven it, so it makes it tough. It makes it a little bit tricky. It does make it a little bit tricky. He would definitely be solid at Barcelona. They have accountability, no player throwing others under, captain leads and guides instead of groaning. Ideally, you need a midfield of players who are all comfortable on the ball, in my opinion. I agree with that. If not, good teams will just press the technically stunted central midfielder. Yeah, I think that's very true. The reason I was raising that question earlier was just because of this stat that Texts put on Twitter September, so just over a month ago now. This was Mainoo's record, playing with Eriksen and Amrabat. And I just thought it's interesting because we do typically sort of think, for a Kobbie partner, it needs to be like a Declan Rice. Right? But perhaps these sort of numbers prove that it doesn't have to be. Again, I keep going back to, like a Barcelona or a PSG, the way that they play. Of course, top end of the scale in terms of the quality that they've got, they can afford to do it because they are immense. But they sort of have gone down that more technical route in the midfield. The Premier League's probably become a bit more physical in intention, I think, in midfield in recent times. But these numbers were just interesting to me. Baleba or Anderson suit any midfield, whoever the manager is going forward. Yeah, and those type of footballers are beautiful. They're not that common, they're quite rare. But you can't beat a midfielder that you feel can just play any system and play it to a high level. Yeah, you can't beat that sort of player. Yeah, they either make it or leave. Certain players have had it too comfortable for far too long. Look at Baleba already throwing his toys out. We need solid mental players. Mainoo fighting is good. Yeah, that's my point of view from talking to Mainoo. If I was talking to him, the feedback would be to work hard, right? To get your head down and just work, try and get that starting position. Be so good in training that Amorim can't physically leave you out. I also said that I would take the opportunity to play for the under-21s. It might be a bit of an ego hit, having played in a semi-final and a final for the first team, but I would be taking that under-21 opportunity next month to show myself, to prove my mentality, my personality. It's just that I want to play football, because I think managers would like to see that. So yeah. Remember, AJ, those cute, diminutive midfielders can cover ground and have endurance intensity. It's a must in today's game. Yeah, that is a good point as well. Yeah, the PSG, the Barcelona players in particular, sort of, like I said, are some of the best players in the world. So it does have to be taken with a pinch of salt, the way that they approach it. It's not easy to replicate elsewhere if you don't have that quality. I don't know, I do just wonder, have we put too much focus on, over the past few years, on physicality? Has it become too much of a demand? I think the English game always has been a more physical one, right? Compared to Spain or Italy or France or Germany, whatever. English football always has been probably the most physical, the most combative, the most demanding, the most intense. Recently, has there been too much of too much emphasis, I guess, placed on that sort of player? Is there still room for the player which isn't as quick, isn't as powerful, but mentally is steps ahead? It's only 2-3 seasons ago we saw Eriksen and Casemiro start the season phenomenally well, and those two couldn't move. Those two couldn't move, right? Let's not forget this. Was it 2 seasons ago? 2.5, 3? I can't remember. Whenever it was. For a long time, we had Casemiro who couldn't move. We had Eriksen who couldn't move. And then we had Bruno Fernandes in front of them. And that midfield worked. In terms of longevity, in terms of winning the Premier League title, it was probably never going to happen. But I think it proved that you can do it, right? You can play football with a different type of footballer. Zubimendi's a nice example, yeah. Physically quite limited at Arsenal. Get the right players around him, which certainly helps as well. But also because he's such an intelligent player, then it works. Maybe that's, Kobbie sort of long-term to become that sort of player. I'd argue Kobbie was one of the only players that performed okay against Grimsby. Yeah, I think Grimsby would be a weird stick to beat any individual with. There was clearly something much, much bigger going on there than just, this player wasn't good enough. It wasn't an elite team though. No, yeah, that's what I said. I think it was capped in terms of how high it could go, but it was an interesting idea. I'll take mentality over anything. Look at Scholes. Doubt he was the quickest or strongest in any game he played. Yeah, obviously, again, the game has developed since then. I do think, well, developed is an interesting one. Changed since then, we'll say. I do think these days it is more physical. It is more intense. I think the pressing structures, the pressing systems are a lot better than what they were. I think the managers are more switched on with that side of the game. But yeah, it does change it. I think physicality is the primary attribute for elite teams. Look at how many giants City and Arsenal have, but the nippy boys still have a space to poke around. I think it's very true. And I'm going to come back to that in just a second. But before that, we've got Steve Brooks in the chat with 10 gifted memberships. Steve, thank you very, very much, my friend. Guys, you know what to do. That chat right now should be full of love hearts and flames and, I don't know, Kobbie Mainoo emojis or something, saying thank you to Steve. Because, Steve, that is absolutely iconic, legendary behavior. Thank you very, very much for the support. As always, my friend. Super kind, super, super generous. Thank you very much. Means a lot. David, you're right. He's a legend. In hindsight, buying a midfielder over a new striker would have been the better option in the summer. Not even necessarily over a striker, just perhaps over one of the forwards. 3 new forwards and not a midfielder when we needed a midfielder was a bit weird. We said it at the time. We've also got Steve with a 3-month membership saying, loving the stream, learning day today. Thank you very much, Steve, as always. Love having you here, my friend. And yeah, we're always trying to learn. What was the comment I wanted to go back to? It was our other Steve. So many Steves. Have you ever met a Steve that isn't a legend? I'll say I haven't. Did I say that right? That was meant to be a compliment. I think I got it right. Yeah, I think physicality is the primary attribute for elite teams. Look at how many giants City and Arsenal have, but the nippy boys still have a space to poke around. Thoughts on that? Take the floor, guys. Thoughts on that? Thoughts on that comment? The elite teams these days put that focus on perhaps more physical players. Of course, space for technical players. You can have them in your team. But the league is putting more emphasis on physical players to take them to the top. Give me your thoughts. I want to know what you guys think. I want to know if that's a good thing. Is it good for the league? Is it good for entertainment? Is it what you want? If it's not what you want, how can you overcome it? How does the game evolve again? Who's the first one to change things, right? Because, realistically, the cycle in football isn't broken until someone breaks it, which sounds incredibly obvious, but is important. There comes that point where it only changes when someone changes. The Premier League was played in a very similar way for a long time. Then Guardiola came into league and sort of shifted the way that we play. Right? And everyone started copying that. Then everyone copies that for a long time. And then sort of the new meta comes out that suddenly you've got to be these 6'7" giants everywhere. Everyone starts doing that. Who's going to be that first team to go, okay, so everyone's massive. Everyone's these huge players, which means they probably can't cover the low ground quite as well as what we can. So if we get a load of small, technical, low centre of gravity players in, we're going to cook these teams. And then that becomes a new meta. Sort of how does that happen? When does that happen? How does it happen? Can United be the team to do that? Would you like to see United be the team to do that or not? What do you think? PSG and Barcelona would disagree with that. Yeah, I agree. even the Spanish national team. Barca taught Newcastle a lesson with less physical players. That match stands out in my head, Newcastle versus Barcelona, because I was sitting here and I literally had the thought, if this was a Premier League match, we were talking about Newcastle versus Barcelona. Barcelona, ridiculous quality, but we would go, that Newcastle intensity, the crowd as well, which is a big thing, but the intensity, the physicality of Newcastle, you would look at that match and go, oh, they're going to cause Barcelona a couple of problems. Barcelona are technical, but that physicality of Newcastle is going to overwhelm them, right? They can be technical all they like, but if I'm a steamroller and take them out, they can't play through. And of course, we didn't see that, ultimately. We saw a Barcelona team, which is technical quality, meant that Newcastle did not get close to the ball, because Barcelona moved the ball in a way, sometimes quickly, sometimes just subtly, in a way that Newcastle couldn't get close. And I think Kobbie is that type of player. Of course, a different level. He's not Frankie de Jong. He's not Pedri. But he's that type of player who sort of goes, I don't need to physically fight you because I'm a bit smarter than you. I can turn a bit cuter than you. And that's what's going to get me out of trouble. I don't need to just butt heads with you every time. It was an interesting idea. Does that work week in, week out in the Premier League? I don't know. It'd be fascinating to see that Barcelona team in the Premier League right now. How would it get on? Would that midfield work? Same with PSG, for example. Could you put their midfield in the Premier League right now? Would it work? Not sure. Be very interesting to see, but I have no idea how we can simulate that. I think you need to be able to battle hard, win duels, hold a low block, defend set pieces. I do agree that I think the minimum in football is to battle. I think you put your battle in if you can match the opposition in terms of the battling, not necessarily physically, but almost in terms of work rate and sort of desire and heart and all these lovely words that we like to use. I think that's the minimum. You have to match the opposition on that to earn the right to do the other things, to do the pretty rainbow flicks and stuff. You've got to earn the right to do that by competing initially. I'd like to see us carry the ball into low blocks and force the Giants to stick a leg out. See, that's what I think, right? There's a match. It was City versus United. I can't think what season it would have been. And he watched the highlights back on Match of the Day. And he commented, I can't think who the City midfielders would have been at the time. I think it would have been the David Silva, perhaps Bernardo Silva era. Maybe Fernandinho was playing, I don't know. And United had Fellaini in the Manu Matic in midfield. And it always sticks out in my head. My uncle commented on how the United players looked like these massive blokes, but like absolute statues compared to these small players that were sort of speed of thought, just too quick for them. And, not actually rapid over 100 yards, for example, but just the speed of thought, the way that they could turn, the way that they can twist, made a difference almost night and day between the two teams. That always sticks out to me. That if right now this meta is huge physical presences, power, intensity, like, at what point is a team going to go, but what if we don't do that? What if we flip that and try and do something a little bit different? I cannot wait to see a Premier League team try and do that. And I'd love to know how it's going to go. I'd love to know how much success they're going to have trying to play in that way. It will happen eventually. Inevitably, it will happen eventually. Because if you look back over 200 years of football, it's just cycles, right? We don't see new tactics. We just see old ones brought back and freshened up a little bit. So I'm very interested to see when that's gonna change again. When that introduction of smaller players is going to come back into the cycle. These little players who get under people and wiggle past them. I'd love to know when that's going to come back. I'd love to know. PSG and Barcelona have you chasing shadows, but they don't have to cover half the pitch at the same time. Character and athleticism are important. Yeah, and the point you made there about they don't have to cover half the pitch at the same time. It's also, just your style of play, right? If you do play a little bit slower, you can afford to have slower players because you don't spend as much time losing possession, so you don't spend as much time chasing the ball. Same if you play in a low block. If you play really deep, really deep, get lots of players behind the ball, so you don't go for the high press. You take the Crystal Palace approach, if you like. You don't need so much physicality. You can have slower players, which is why the likes of Wharton and Will Hughes, why they work in midfield, because the gaps are smaller. So the The way you want to play also affects the players that can be successful within your style. If you want big gaps a lot, then you do need players that can drive and that can cover them. I just think the Giants will become more agile. Then we need to like clone Paul Pogba somehow. That's what we need to do if we want one of those. Long ball / direct football is the solution to the high press compared to the 90s when it was just for bad teams. Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I think the perception of sort of direct football has changed, right? It was seen at one point as if you played long, it was because you were incapable, whereas now it is seen more as a solution to a certain problem. I think that certainly has happened. I think we've seen that change. In an ideal future, United's midfield and wingers are mainly small, technical and nippy, like 2008 Barca. I watch football to be entertained, and it's those type of players that entertain me. Now let's just ignore like the personnel we've got on screen for a second. All right, I'll try and make it visually make some sort of sense. I'm interested to hear. I've put United in a 4-3-3 here. Imagine it's not United, right? Imagine these are all blank names, and let's say typically teams in football play a 4-3-3, and we are of the opinion that the current sort of meta, the current way to play, the current approach is to have your tall physical players with a blend of a couple of your more technical ones. I would love to hear where you would be going for your physical players. Let's not highlight Kobbie because that's not the conversation anymore. Where do you think you need your big players? Like, inevitably one of them is going to be centre-back, of course. Two of them will be centre-back. But sort of in a typical 4-3-3, look at the white shirts if you want. Use them as the example. Can we do that real quick? We can. Look at these shirts here. In this 4-3-3, if we're assuming that we need these big players, which ones need to be that sort of physical players? And I think we should also probably point out that physical doesn't have to mean 6'3". And Mbeumo is incredibly technically gifted, but also physically. He's not 6'2", but he's so strong. He looks after the ball so well. You don't have to be a giant to be a physical player. Mount, weirdly, is quite a physical player, despite not being the tallest. I would always say Odegaard is actually quite physical. Considering his size and everything, the type of player he is, he uses his body very well. Pedri, weirdly, physically looks after himself very nicely because of his technique. So, we're saying the Giants are your centre-backs, your 6, and your striker. Now, what I would like to hear is thoughts on why the 6 needs to. Because normally I would agree. Sort of, I think, if you asked me just a week ago, I'd have probably gone, yeah, have your 6 there. It's physical, you can deal with the long ball. Lovely. But does that guy need to be physical? When you've got these guys just behind him, literally just behind him, say particularly for long football, if the 6 can get the ball, systematically you could switch so that centre-back goes and deals with it. Does your 6 have to be as tall? Would you almost be better off with one of these guys being tall? Now, I mentioned an idea right at the start of the stream, on sort of an incredibly basic level, almost international football level basic, on how I've always viewed a midfield. I viewed it as sort of ball winner, connector, creator. But does that ball winner have to be the big one? Is there a world where you sort of go ball winner here, deep line playmaker here? It's an interesting one. Sergio Busquets was a bit taller, and so was Abidal before him for Xavi and Iniesta. Yeah, very true. Carrick was quite tall, another good example. Rodri, also quite tall. I want my 6 to win 90% of all duels, ground, air, etc. But I also want 4 giants for set pieces in both ends. That's a fair point. To win the duels, second balls, cover ground while facing transition. Yeah, transitions are a very good point for this. Giants need to be your goalkeeper, your central centre-back, your 6 and the 9. The spine of the team gives strength and targets to hit from set pieces. Yep, spot on. Spot on, I think. The big players go to the CDM or the 6, the centre forward and the centre backs, and the technical players maybe the wingers, full backs, and one of either 2 midfielders. That's my opinion. think regardless of how we set up these days, set pieces are super important, so we need at least 4 to 5 guys in the team to win headers. See, obviously a lot of you guys, you've made a comment of centre-backs, 6, perhaps your striker as well, and you're looking at that sort of core. Obviously at the moment in the Premier League, we're seeing that it's the fullbacks as well. That these guys become centre-backs, really, you know. Gvardiol's played in these positions, Ben White over the past few seasons, Calafiori's not exactly small. There has been that growth of tall, strong, centre-back like fullbacks. Is that why it's become such a physical league, right? Because the strikers are quite big now in the Premier League, I would say. Haaland, Šeško, they're all big guys. The fullbacks are tall. The centre-backs are tall. And the sixes, maybe not so much this season, to be fair, with someone like Zubimendi coming in. But, you know, we're seeing Rodri and Rice, for example, at times over the past few seasons. You know, you look at that and you think about Arsenal, you think no wonder they're good at set pieces, right? When they've got that many sort of tall, beacon-like players that they can play to. No wonder they're good on set pieces. Depends on the wingers too. Are they creative wingers or are they inside forwards? If you have creative wingers, you can have only athletic big guys inside. I think that's fair. 2 of the 6s must be athletic and good on the ball, and also the centre-backs. 2 of the 3 midfielders must be physically sound, also 1 of the full-backs and 1 of the wingers, both centre-backs of course. 1 of the wingers is an interesting comment. What would be your reason for wanting the more physical winger? There are tall players who play like little nippy ones. A player like Gravenberch comes to mind. Yeah, very good example. Very good example. When we talk about technical players, a physical 6 can also be a decent technical player. Rodri, again, would be the great example. Maybe not as technical as your number 8 or your 10, but you can have a very physical but decently technical player. I think also, do we throw the term around technical too much? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the term, but does it give us enough context as to what type of player we're talking about? Because I would say Toni Kroos was technical. I would say Frenkie de Jong is technical. But if you were to watch the 2 of them, they're completely different players. And by the way, that's not a criticism of what you're saying. I used the term, and I've been thinking, do we need to stop using the term technical? Or if not, stop using it? Do we need to explain it more? Because like I said, Toni Kroos was a technical player, but he wasn't like a dribbler. You know, Xavi and Iniesta were both technical, but they were both very different players. You know, what they were technically good at was quite different. Yeah, do we need to expand the term? Does it need to be technical dash words? Do we need to add something to it? With physical as well, to be fair. We talk about technical, we talk about physical. Physical can be Mbeumo, or physical can be Dan Burn. But if you watch them both, very different players. You know, physicality as a skill is a term that's thrown about a lot, and I think it's very true. Salah is incredibly strong. Bukayo Saka's incredibly strong. And Mbeumo's strong. But they're not these massive set-piece beacons, for example, are they, that we typically associate with physicality. I think it's an interesting point again. Anyway, let's get rid of these players. Well, not get rid of them. Let's keep them. But let's get these United boys back in. Someone like Caicedo or Rodri are 2 players in 1. That frees up space somewhere else. See, I would actually look at the Chelsea midfield and say it's not quite so physical. I think Caicedo, as good as he is, phenomenal player. I don't know that physically he's that blessed. Perhaps particularly if you're going back to the context of sort of height, if you're talking about physicality in that way. Caicedo is not the biggest in that way. Enzo Fernandez, when he plays there, isn't. We've seen Gusto there in recent weeks. He's not really that sort of player. It's interesting. Physical duel winner is very different to a physical ball carrier. Absolutely. And also very different to physical hold-up play. And physical duel winner, is it on the ground or is it in the air? Lisandro Martinez is a very physical ground dueler. But in the air, he struggles a little bit, doesn't he? It's interesting. I've recently done scouting for a pro club, and technical is viewed as a massive umbrella term. Yeah, I think we have to split it into like deeper meanings underneath that. Yeah, we can say technical, sure. But then we've got to really focus on what we actually mean by that. He's technically secure, or he's good. Bruno and Kobbie are both technically good. Of course they are. But in very different ways. Bruno, in terms of his creativity, that's a technical skill, as is the press resistance and dribbling of Kobbie. It's a technical skill, but they're very different technical skills. We probably need to change the way that we talk about that. Caicedo can play fullback. That alone says a lot about a lot of his physicality. Yeah, like I said, Caicedo is a phenomenal player. So good. Got a lot of criticism when he first went to Chelsea. That was always going to be like pie in the face to people because it's a good footballer. Good footballer. You want a central midfielder who can carry and dribble. Yeah, so it's sort of my types of favourite players. I would say there's 3, maybe 4. Maybe I just like football. I love your players that can ping a ball. Ping a ball. Paul Scholes, Tony Kroos, Michael Carrick. Ping a ball. Lovely. I love myself a little dribbler midfielder, which is why I like Kobbie. Frankie de Jong, prime example of that type of player. That player that can get low and can dribble. Pedri as well. I love a dribbly winger. Your Neymars, that type of player. You also can't just beat that maverick, which can be so many different play styles, but the main man charges about everywhere, gets the job done. Wayne Rooney being the prime example. You can't beat that sort of player as well. Kante was a special player, tiny but unbelievably physical. Yeah, exactly. On face value, you wouldn't say he's physical in terms of he doesn't tick the boxes of 6'4" and a threat on set pieces, but he was undoubtedly physically incredibly gifted. It's weird. We definitely need to change that moving forward. AJ, I think people are also somehow confusing physicality with that height presence. For example, Caicedo, Saka, and Bumo Salah, Timber are physical yet lack that height, like Stack and Casemiro and Rodri. Spot on. I think part of physicality is also the ground you can cover. Right, that's part of your physical strengths, how fast you can run, how far you can run, your stride length. That surely comes into physicality somewhere, because that's literally your physical build, your physical makeup. I know this will be confusing, but I'd like to see Dalot and Kobbie central from our goal kicks. Give them 2 touches to find a 10 or a wing back. All right, Steve, I don't want you to explain yourself. I want to see if I can figure it out without you saying, and then I'll see what you say. Are you going to put Dalot wing back for this, or are you going to put Dalot centre back for this? You're a Dalot wing back kind of guy. So on your goal kicks, Steve, are you talking push one up, push your midfielder up, get one of those wing backs inside the pitch like that? Is that sort of what you mean? Maybe you drop Mbeumo wider. Obviously, it wouldn't necessarily be Casemiro in your team. It might be someone else. Is that sort of the idea you're thinking of, Steve? Or something a little bit different? Would it maybe be, imagine Dalot's playing centre-back. Step him up into midfield. On goal kicks. Of course, we're talking here. On goal kicks. We've seen Dalot play there before. He can do that. Yeah, Rooney. Rooney's my favourite footballer of all time. Wayne Rooney is the reason I like football in the first place. Just, what a legend. Could do literally anything. Literally anything. There isn't a part of football that Wayne Rooney couldn't excel at if he wanted to. He could have been a half-decent goalkeeper, I swear. He could have been. So good. So good. I think you need one of each. A Mainoo and a Wharton combination would be ideal. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm talking about with the point of different type of technical players. Kobbie and Wharton are a lovely example. Very technical. I think everyone would agree with that. But Kobbie wants to get the ball and sort of dribble over a few yards. Wharton likes to play 2 or 3 touch creative passing football. Both technical, both very different. If you can get both of them in your team, wow. At that point, you probably do want someone physical to help out. But yeah, wow. Likewise, AJ, Rooney is the perfect ideal. Just amazing, right? Just insane. Dropping Casemiro deeper. Well, in there almost. So you drop him into there. And split your centre-backs, Steve? Is that what you're almost saying? Obviously, only from goal kicks we're talking. United trying to play out from the back here. Could Mount play next to Kobbie? It's got to suit him better than left wing-back. Yeah, there's been a lot of shouts for Mount left wing-back recently, and I'm not sure where they've stemmed from. I know he did play about 15 minutes there when we were trailing against Brentford the other week. But I don't really personally see it as a sort of long-term plan. Not really. Steve, I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I think my natural response would be I just wish we were less stubborn and we would just start in a back 4, so we're almost not rotating so many different players just to get to a basic idea, if you know what I mean. But if we do have to be stubborn within the system, then yeah, I like it as a different solution because it gets players more comfortable, I think. Yeah, quite like that. Let's have a little read up in the chat. If we plan to press and push up the 8s, he will need screen and defence. Yeah, I think that's where the 6 can be important as well. Sort of that sort of shuttle job in front of the defenders. Since we got beat by Barcelona all those years back, we have had a focus at trying to get through more technical players in the youth and with the likes of Kagawa, etc. It hasn't quite worked yet. It does always feel that United are a little bit behind the trend in the last 12 years. In the data-led approach that we saw probably 8 years ago, United have now caught on and we're like, yeah, let's have a data-based approach when everyone else is now moving on to something different. It feels like we're always a little bit behind the trend. Everyone went through this phase of slow football while we were still playing quick, and now everyone else has started to speed up, and then last season we were very slow. We always seem just a couple of years behind what everyone else is doing, which is why we never quite close the gap. We never quite catch up. Fun. Good fun. Good fun. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap up the stream there because I think we've discussed everything that I wanted to discuss for today. The one more thing that I would like to ask from you guys is, could you please get in the chat and let me know some video ideas that I can do this week before the Liverpool game? Not to do with Liverpool, we've got that covered already. What can we talk about? We've spoken about Mbeumo and Ahmad. We've spoken about Cunha and Mount compared to each other. We haven't spoken about the new front three actually working together yet, to be fair. We haven't spoken about that. But we've spoken about United's fast starts. We've spoken about wide play. We've spoken about long ball. I don't know what else to talk about because the international break means United aren't playing, so we're not getting these new ideas, these new conversations. So I'm sort of a little bit stuck. I'm on a mission currently to work on a video comparing sort of Amorim's idea at Sporting to United. Why is it different? Why is it not working? What's the end goal, perhaps, for Amorim? Using that Sporting team as a blueprint. Why Cunha hasn't settled yet? That is the one thing I'd wondered about a Cunha video. I just don't know. Don't quite know how to approach it is the only problem. How to pick up the mentality of players to have the we will never die mentality no matter the system. Your football team needs them. Your football team needs them. Absolutely. Academy players who can change our style of play in the future as a video idea. I like that. Could you do an update on players like Lacey, Leon, Kone? Yeah, I had wondered about doing a Lacey video. That's the other one. They're sort of the two that have crossed my mind. Could I do a Cunha video? Why he's not quite settled. But do we need that video or is it just time? Is that the answer? And yeah, Lacey is the other one I'd wondered about. The game plan, Liverpool's weaknesses and how we can exploit. Yeah, I'm a little bit caught up on my plan at the moment. We're going to do the Friday stream at 11 a.m. like 11 a.m. like we always do in the build up to a match. We'll pick an 11 that we think Amorim should use to beat Liverpool. I don't know whether to do a video as well, almost like a more tactical focus. But because these days the streams stay up as videos for you guys to watch after, I don't know if we need the stream and the video. That's the only thing I'm unsure on. I don't know if we need both. I'd like to do both, but I don't know if they're both needed. Or do we just have a week where we have less content? But that doesn't sound very fun, and I'll be broke, which wouldn't be ideal. Please like and subscribe. Liverpool preview video would be nice, especially if it's before the stream. Yeah, maybe if we changed the stream time, maybe if we streamed a little bit later, did the video early. Because the problem is Thursday. Is that too early to do a Liverpool preview video? Not sure. Do a video on how United can play over AFCON without Ahmad and Mbeumo and Mazraoui. Oscar, we will definitely do that. We will definitely do that. It probably won't be yet, but like maybe towards the end of... When does the African Cup of Nations start? Is it January? We will do that video just before. It feels a bit soon yet, but yeah, closer to the time. It's on the idea list. Lovely. Thank you very much. Not all viewers are stream focused, prefer short videos. Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, perhaps we will do both then. What Lisandro Martinez can offer coming back into the team. Yes, definitely. I'm just trying to gauge when I think he's going to come back and actually be in contention and actually be an option for us to use. I would definitely do that video. Do a preview video, then stream a watch along reacting to it. Should that be my next stream? Just reacting to my content. No postman today. Steve, you're right. The doggos have been very quiet. Very quiet. I like the video because you get to say your whole idea, not interrupted by chat goose boys. Yeah, valid. Valid. But then I ramble too much sometimes. Cunha needs central midfielders like Wharton and Mainoo so he can receive the balls and carry it. Mount is crucial now to help out Bruno and Casemiro sitting a bit deeper. Yes. Broke? You? Never. Believe me. The views might have been good in the past year. YouTube does not pay like you think it would. It's a struggle, but we try our best. It's a grind. By physical winger, I mean you can't have two Rashford type players. Okay, so almost by physical you mean like that hard worker, like the almost more defensively capable winger a little bit. A video on when we need both Maguire and De Ligt versus when we only need one large boy. That's an interesting idea, actually. Not even necessarily on the centre-back front, but just because we talk about, this game, could we play a winger at wing-back? Or this game, could we play a midfielder in the 10 or a full-back at centre-back, whatever. Maybe discussing the different types of matches that require the different partnerships, the different dynamics, the different types of players playing. That could be good fun. So we could branch that Maguire and De Ligt idea into a wing-back, centre-back, midfielder, 10. I like that. XG stats checks coming soon. Only if you guys start using the code AJA10. There was another stream. I'm tired. Another chat that I want to read. I can't think where it was. The other thing I will say, by the way, if you do have any ideas, channel improvements, video ideas, or if you just want to talk about football, with the boys, head over to the Discord server. There is a link in the description right now. It is completely free to join. Literally costs you nothing at all. You just click join, and there's 800 people, I think, right now. 800 people who just sit and talk about United all the time. So if you want to get involved, absolutely do it. Ooh, two sort of similar comments here. A video on how to pick the perfect bench, and then another comment, analysis of Amorim's subs, what he does when we're losing versus winning, etc. Ooh. I think what I would like to do as well on the channel, and it works because you guys are both members, is I'd like to try and do videos. It'd be difficult time-wise. I'm quite low on time in life at the moment. But I would like to be able to do extra videos, specifically for members. Sorry to those of you that aren't members. But where I don't care about the views, because I am a person who is sort of driven by numbers, and like I said, I want to have enough income from the channel to live. So there is a focus on, is this video going to get views and stuff? I would like to have a section, an area, maybe not even on YouTube, maybe it could be something separate, where the views don't matter. The people want what they want. I don't know if that could be a separate website. Is it Patreon that is normally used for that sort of content, for example? Could we do that, where it doesn't matter if only 10 people watch it? If those 10 people want that content, we could do that sort of content. So we could look at some more niche things like throw-ins, for example, which is never going to do well in a YouTube video, but there'll be people out there that are interested in it. We could do it like that. I'd like to try that at some point. Makeup tutorials do well on YouTube. I must say, in makeup, damn, I'm not bad looking. Video of the most important position in modern football. See, that's another one that would be perfect for that type of content, or for the second channel as well, to be fair. I would love to see a video of what your preferred double pivot would be after the January or summer transfer window. I would love to do that. I'm obsessed with talking about midfield. I've got so many different ideas right now. you know, around this time of year, I'd like to try and start looking ahead to the summer and get my ideas of what I want United to be looking at next year. And I'm already starting to think about what I want my midfield to be at United next year. And there's a few things that I'm thinking about. There's a few ideas that I've got for United which work really nicely, and I can't figure out which one I like more, which one's the better blend, which one's more affordable in the market, all of that stuff. Could put those videos in the Discord. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea. Make a new channel, add it to the channel section on your YouTube page. Yeah, there's definitely options. There are definitely things that we can do. I want to try to just go bigger and better with everything. With the videos that we do, with the Discord, the second channel needs to get up and running. There's so much that I want to do. Time is a hot commodity, right? Hot commodity. But yeah, I'd like as much as possible. That's why you guys liking, you guys tuning into these streams, subscribing, all that stuff really does help a lot more than what you probably ever even realised, to be honest. You and Carl Anker would be best mates, pair of midfield lovers, and Facebook memes. But I think would be best mates anyway, to be honest. What a boy. There are good videos and edits on the Discord. Steve? No. Maybe try watch-alongs from... yeah, I'd love to do that. The problem is I can't do it with United because, first of all, I watch the games with my brother for a start. Be a bit weird for a stream. But also because I'm trying to make my notes for the video, etc. when I'm watching United. I would love to try and do it for like the World Cup, for example. We said the same for the Euros and it didn't ever quite happen. That's why we're trying to get the second channel going. Like I said, it's so difficult. So difficult to do on top of everything else. But I would like to try and go in that direction where, yeah, we can sit and stream. You think the World Cup next year, I don't know what the kickoff times are. They're quite weird. But let's say there's an afternoon one, a random match, Spain versus Belgium at 2 p.m. It would be great to sit here and stream me watching it and sort of picking up on things in the moment. I'd like to try that. I'd like to try that. Anyway, said about 10 minutes ago I was going to stop streaming. Now I'm actually going to stop streaming. Did I just show off my rubber duck? Can you see that rubber duck? No, you can't see it. Sorry. Yes, I am going to stop the stream there. Thank you guys very much for watching. As always, I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you to everyone who has sat there quietly watching. Thank you to everyone who's been involved in the chat. For memberships, for gifted memberships. As always, you are legends. You keep the channel going. And you give me sort of the motivation to get up every day and make another video, even when I hate my football club. Thank you to everyone who liked, subscribed, got notifications on. If you went over and checked out Discord, class. I'll see you over there. So yes, thank you very much for everyone who has supported it and supported the channel and supported everything that we've done over the past however many years. Thank you all. You are all absolute legends. Long may it continue. Hopefully there's content coming this week. I don't know what it will be. I don't know what it is, but we'll find something hopefully. If not, I'll see you when I see you. I'll see you hopefully in the next video and in the next stream, which will be on Friday. The international break is nearly over. So nearly, or so soon, we get to go back to the terror of our football club, which will be good fun. Apart from that, nothing left to talk about. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this stream. Let me find the button. There it is. And yeah, I will see you guys